Imagine a vast empire stretching across galaxies, an alien civilization so advanced that its technology bends the very fabric of reality. Planets reshaped at will, entire species engineered for servitude, and a society that has ruled for millennia without challenge. They have seen countless civilizations rise and fall, conquering them with ease. To them, lesser species are mere tools, biological machines built for labor. But in their arrogance, they made a critical mistake. They enslaved humanity. And in doing so, they unleashed something they had never encountered before, a force that would shake their empire to its core. It started with abductions. Small at first, unnoticed by Earth's primitive governments, dismissed as conspiracy theories or hallucinations. Humans were easy to take, their minds unable to comprehend the technology used against them. They woke up in sterile chambers, surrounded by strange beings with elongated skulls and void black eyes. The Zarkons, as they were known, were a ruthless empire, one of the oldest in the universe. Their vast armada had crushed thousands of civilizations, bending them to their will. To them, humanity was just another resource, an expendable workforce to mine their planets, construct their cities, and serve their ruling class. At first, humans seemed perfect for enslavement, physically weaker than many alien species, incapable of interstellar travel and divided by constant conflicts. They were easy to capture, easy to control. Their emotions, their individuality, their chaotic nature, none of it was seen as a threat. The Zarkons had enslaved countless species before, each one easily broken, their spirits crushed under the weight of superior technology. But there was something different about humans, something the Zarkons failed to recognize. It wasn't just intelligence or adaptability. It was defiance, a deep-rooted, unbreakable will to resist oppression. The first signs were small, almost imperceptible. Human slaves worked tirelessly on the barren mining colonies of Zarka Prime, extracting rare minerals needed for the Empire's war machines. They labored under brutal conditions, watched by towering biomechanical overseers. Unlike other species, which quickly submitted, humans whispered to each other in the dark. They shared stories, remembered Earth, remembered freedom, and then they began to fight back. Sabotage started first. Faulty wiring, misplaced tools, sudden accidents that slowed production. At first, the Zarkons dismissed it as incompetence, punishing those responsible without a second thought. But the incidents kept happening. Machines malfunctioned, key systems collapsed, and production quotas fell. It wasn't random. It was calculated. The humans were organizing, learning the Empire's technology, and using it against them. Then came the escapes. No species had ever escaped the Zarkon slave colonies before. Their prisons were impenetrable, their security systems absolute. And yet, the humans found ways. They studied the alien technology, exploited weaknesses the Zarkons hadn't even considered. They learned how to disable tracking implants, how to override security protocols. They moved in secret, forming underground networks, passing information across the Empire. And when the first humans escaped into the wild void of space, the Zarkons realized too late what they had unleashed. Humans had something no other enslaved species had ever possessed: the ability to turn the tools of their oppressors against them. Unlike the methodical, rigid minds of the Zarkons, humans thrived in chaos. They adapted, innovated, and fought back in ways the Empire could not predict. A single Zarkon soldier, trained for war, was superior to any human in one-on-one combat. But humans didn't fight fair. They ambushed, they used guerrilla tactics, they sabotaged supply lines, turned entire planets into war zones. They hacked into Zarkon systems, broadcasting messages of resistance, inciting rebellion among other enslaved races. The Zarkons responded with overwhelming force. Their fleets raised entire colonies, wiping out any sign of resistance. They deployed extermination squads, hunting down those who dared to defy them. But the more they crushed humanity, the stronger the resistance grew. For every human killed, 2 more took their place. The Empire's greatest strength, its unchallenged dominance, was turning into its greatest weakness. The Zarkons had grown complacent, relying on fear to maintain control. But fear did not break humans. It fueled them. Then came the unthinkable. Humans began taking control of Zarkon ships, not just stealing them, but mastering their technology, using it in ways even the Zarkons had never considered. The first hijacked warship was a minor incident, dismissed as a fluke. Then another fell. And another. Soon, entire fleets were being turned against the Empire. Human rebels, once scattered prisoners, now commanded their own armada. The Empire was no longer facing an uprising. It was facing a war, and at the heart of it all was something the Zarkons could never understand. Humans didn't just fight for survival. They fought for freedom, for something greater than themselves. And that made them unstoppable. The rebellion spread like wildfire, igniting unrest across the Zarkon Empire. What had started as isolated sabotage had grown into a full-scale insurrection. Other enslaved species, long broken under Zarkon rule, began to take notice. At first, they were hesitant. After all, they had seen what happened to those who resisted. The Zarkons were ruthless, their response to rebellion swift and merciless. But humans were different. They weren't just resisting. They were winning. The news of stolen warships, of entire colonies breaking free, sent shockwaves through the Empire. If humans, a species the Zarkons had dismissed as weak, could fight back, what else had the Empire miscalculated? It was on the factory world of HFY where everything changed. The Zarkons had used this planet as a mass production facility for centuries. Its surface covered in towering factories that churned out weapons, ships, and technology for the Empire's endless wars. It was thought to be impenetrable, protected by an artificial storm that made orbital assaults impossible. But humans weren't planning an orbital assault. They had infiltrated from within. The uprising on HFY was unlike anything the Zarkons had ever faced. Instead of launching a direct attack, human operatives had spent months embedding themselves within the factories, learning their systems, understanding their weaknesses. They studied the Zarkon guards, deciphered their routines, and when the time came, they struck with precision. It started with the power grid. Entire sectors of the planet plunged into darkness, security systems failing in an instant. Then the weapons turned. Zarkon sentries found their own automated defenses aimed at them, their battle droids malfunctioning, turning against their masters. Explosions rocked the factory districts as human saboteurs destroyed key production lines, crippling the Empire's supply chain. The most astonishing part? They didn't do it alone. Inspired by humanity's defiance, other enslaved species joined the fight. The insectoid Krynath, long known for their physical endurance but broken by centuries of servitude, suddenly rose up against their captors. The reptilian Drakva, whose warlike nature had been suppressed under Zarkon rule, took up arms once again. Even the synthetic drone species, programmed to serve the Empire without question, began to resist. Human hackers had found a way to override their control, turning the Empire's own machines against them. The fall of HFY was the first major victory of the rebellion. But it was what followed that truly terrified the Zarkon High Command. The humans had not just seized control of a planet. They had taken the knowledge within it. They now understood Zarkon technology better than ever before. Their scientists, engineers, and strategists worked around the clock. Reverse engineering, weapons, upgrading captured warships, and even designing their own. The Zarkons, desperate to crush the uprising before it spiraled further out of control, deployed their most elite forces. The Dread Guard, a legion of cybernetically enhanced warriors, was sent to hunt down the rebels. These were not mere soldiers. They were nightmares made real, each one a walking fortress, immune to conventional weapons, programmed for absolute loyalty. The Empire had never needed to deploy them before. Until now. When the Dread Guard arrived, the initial battles were devastating. Rebel strongholds were wiped out in hours, human forces scattered. It seemed for a moment that the Empire might reclaim control. But humans had something the Zarkons never anticipated, a capacity to learn, to adapt, and to exploit weaknesses others couldn't see. The first Dread Guard fell in an ambush on the ice moon of Velkaris. Human engineers, analyzing their armor, discovered a flaw in the energy shielding. An exploit so small the Zarkons themselves had overlooked it. But humans didn't overlook anything. Using modified plasma rifles, they targeted weak points with surgical precision, disabling the seemingly unstoppable warriors. The next wave of attacks was even more devastating. Humans had not just figured out how to defeat the Dreadguard. They had repurposed their technology, creating weapons specifically designed to tear through Zarkon defenses. The Empire was now facing a war it had never prepared for. It had always relied on overwhelming force, assuming no species could match its military might. But it had never encountered an enemy like humanity. An enemy that refused to break. An enemy that grew stronger with every battle. An enemy that turned the Empire's own strength against it. The final blow to Zarkon dominance came from within. For centuries, the ruling elite had maintained order through absolute control, ruling with an iron grip. But now, whispers of doubt spread through the highest ranks. How could a primitive species, one that had barely achieved space travel, bring an ancient empire to its knees? The more they fought, the more the empire fractured. Governors began questioning their allegiance. Generals hesitated before deploying their forces. Some even defected, unwilling to throw themselves into a war they were beginning to realize could not be won. And at the center of it all was humanity, relentless, unpredictable, and defiant. The war was far from over, but one thing was clear. The Zarkons had made a fatal mistake. They had enslaved the wrong species. The cracks in the Zarkon Empire widened into fractures, and those fractures shattered into chaos. What had once been an unbreakable dominion spanning thousands of worlds was now fighting a war on multiple fronts. The humans had done something no species had ever managed before. They had turned the Empire's own machinery, its own oppressed races, and even its own ideology against itself. The Zarkons, who had ruled through fear, were now the ones who feared what was coming. Human forces, no longer a scattered rebellion, had become an organized war machine. Their stolen Zarkon warships were now fully operational, retrofitted with devastating human innovations. The cybernetic implants once used to control them had been reverse-engineered, giving human soldiers enhanced abilities, making them stronger, faster, and more resistant to the Empire's bioweapons. With each battle, humanity learned, evolved, and grew deadlier. The most shocking moment in the war came when humans accomplished what even the most advanced races had deemed impossible. They infiltrated the Zarkon capital world, Zarathus Prime. This was a planet protected by the most sophisticated defenses in the known universe. Its orbit was lined with planetary defense stations, its surface a fortress of towering spires, each one housing the ruling elite of the Empire. No fleet had ever made it past Zarathus Prime's security grid. Yet, in the dead of space, amidst the ruins of countless battles, a fleet of repurposed Zarkon warships, now bearing human insignias, approached the unthinkable. But they did not attack head-on. That wasn't how humans fought. They exploited a weakness so simple the Zarkons had never prepared for it: arrogance. They had always relied on absolute control over their systems, their technology, and their people. But when human hackers disabled the planetary shields using nothing more than captured access codes and a deep understanding of the Empire's own bureaucracy, Zarathus Prime was left vulnerable for the first time in its history. The invasion was swift and brutal. Human ground forces, clad in armor forged from Zarkon alloys, tore through the Imperial Palace. They didn't just fight like soldiers, they fought like revolutionaries. Guerrilla warfare, psychological tactics, misdirection, every advantage was exploited. The Zarkon ruling class, beings who had never known battle, who had sat upon thrones of unquestioned power, now cowered in their halls as explosions rocked the capital. But humanity wasn't just here for revenge. They were here to dismantle the Empire from its very foundation. And so, they broadcasted their victory across the entire Zarkon network. The images of their leaders, defeated and powerless, sent a ripple through the Empire that could not be undone. Across the stars, enslaved species saw the impossible. The mighty Zarkons brought to their knees by the very creatures they had once deemed insignificant. The final blow was not delivered by weapons, but by an idea: freedom. A concept the Zarkons had long erased from the minds of those they ruled. But humans had reignited it, turned it into a fire that no army, no warship, no emperor could extinguish. As the Empire collapsed, as entire fleets refused to fight, as planets declared independence, the last remnants of Zarkon rule crumbled into dust. And then, silence. For the first time in millennia, the Zarkon Empire was no more. The surviving Zarkans, those who had once ruled over countless civilizations, now faced a fate worse than death. They were left to wander the ruins of their former glory, scattered and powerless, remnants of an empire that had made a single, devastating mistake. They had enslaved humanity, and humanity had shown them why that was a mistake they would never live to make again. The war was over, but the story of humanity's rise had just begun. With the empire gone, a new order was needed. The liberated planets looked to their unlikely saviors, the species that had toppled the mightiest force in the galaxy. And so, humanity did what they had always done best. They rebuilt, not as conquerors, but as allies. As a force that had learned, not just how to fight, but how to lead. Because in the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that no empire, no matter how ancient or powerful, could ever truly enslave the human spirit. And that was the lesson the galaxy would never forget. The Zarkon Empire was gone, but the war was far from over. When humanity shattered the greatest dominion in the known universe, they didn't just destroy an empire, they created a vacuum. And in the endless void of space, something always rises to fill the emptiness. At first, it seemed like a golden age was beginning. Freed from the grip of the Zarkons, entire planets declared their independence. Former slave worlds turned into centers of innovation, trade, and culture. The species that had once been crushed under the boot of the empire were now free to shape their own destinies. And at the center of it all stood humanity, the species that had brought an ancient civilization to its knees. But freedom is never simple. What happens when 1,000 different species, each with their own agendas, beliefs, and histories of oppression, are suddenly free? What happens when old rivalries, suppressed for centuries by the iron rule of the Zarkons, flare up once more? The answer was chaos. The first warning signs came from the former Zarkon border territories. With the empire gone, these lawless regions became battlegrounds for warlords, opportunists, and remnants of the Zarkon military who refused to surrender. What remained of the once mighty Zarkon fleet splintered into factions, some seeking revenge, others desperate to reclaim lost power. Even as humanity and its allies worked to stabilize the liberated systems, the seeds of a new war were already being planted. Then, something even more unexpected happened. A transmission was intercepted on the edge of known space, a signal unlike anything humanity had ever encountered before. It was ancient, predating even the Zarkons, buried deep within subspace, and worse, it was responding to something. Something that had been awakened. When humans overthrew the Zarkons, they had unknowingly triggered an event far greater than themselves. The Zarkons had been conquerors, but they had also been gatekeepers. Deep within their archives, hidden beneath layers of encryption, were warnings of something older, something they had feared so much they had built their empire in preparation for it. Humanity, in its defiance, had destroyed the very chains that had kept this ancient force at bay. At first, the signs were subtle. Entire colonies went dark overnight. Patrol ships sent to investigate never returned. Then, distress signals began flooding in. Frantic messages filled with static, incoherent screams, and one repeated phrase that sent a chill through every translator. They are coming. Humanity had fought a war of liberation. Now, they were about to fight a war for survival. At first, no one understood what they were dealing with. The disappearances were written off as isolated incidents, the distress signals blamed on malfunctioning, equipment or rogue factions trying to sow fear. But deep in the uncharted territories where the Zarkon Empire had once stood, something was stirring. Something old, something patient. Humanity had destroyed the Empire's grip on the galaxy, but in doing so, they had shattered the barriers that had kept far older threats at bay. The Zarkons, for all their cruelty, had not merely been conquerors. They had been guardians, and now the things they had spent millennia holding back were free to move once more. The first undeniable sign came from a fleet stationed near the ruined world of Zephyr 9. A battle-hardened human admiral, Elias Voss, had been leading reconstruction efforts when the alarms blared. The colony's outermost defense stations, positioned along the asteroid belt, had detected an incoming fleet. But something was wrong. There was no known signature, no familiar energy readings. The ships were massive, jagged, and unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Then the attack came. It wasn't like the battles against the Zarkons. The invaders didn't use standard energy weapons or kinetic projectiles. Their weapons tore through space itself, twisting reality, creating black voids that swallowed ships whole. Entire battleships were reduced to lifeless husks in seconds. Their crews reduced to dust before they could even scream. The few survivors who managed to escape described horrors beyond comprehension. Shadowed figures moving through the wreckage, absorbing energy, consuming matter itself. These weren't mere invaders. They were something far worse. They were harvesters. The name came from ancient Zarkon records, decrypted from what remained of the Empire's archives. The Zarkons had known of them, had feared them so deeply that they had rewritten their own history to forget. The harvesters were not an army. They were an extinction event. No one knew where they had come from, only that they had been here before. In the distant past, they had swept across the galaxy, consuming entire civilizations, reducing them to nothing. The Zarkons had barely survived by sacrificing entire sectors, sealing away their existence, and dedicating their empire to preventing their return. But now, the seals were broken. Humanity had won its freedom, only to find itself facing annihilation. The invasion spread rapidly. Colony after colony fell, entire fleets vanishing into the abyss. The harvesters did not conquer, did not negotiate, they simply erased. Their technology was beyond anything humanity had ever seen, a fusion of organic and mechanical horror, shifting and evolving with every encounter. But if there was one thing humanity had proven, it was that they did not break. In the heart of the chaos, human scientists, engineers, and strategists worked relentlessly, dissecting every scrap of data from lost battles, analyzing every fragment of harvester technology recovered from fallen ships. They refused to believe the enemy was unstoppable. Every force had limits. Every predator had prey, and that was when they discovered the key. Buried deep in Zarkon records was a single piece of information, one the former rulers had been too terrified to act upon. The harvesters were not gods. They were not infinite. They were directed by something greater, something controlling them, a hive core. It wasn't a leader in the traditional sense, but a central intelligence, a mind that bound the harvesters, together, directing their movements across the galaxy. If the hive core could be found, if it could be destroyed, the invasion could be stopped. The problem? It was hidden somewhere beyond the edge of known space, in a region so dangerous that even the Zarkons had dared not explore it. A place that had been erased from all maps, spoken of only in whispers. The Void Rift. And so, humanity did what it had always done. Faced with impossible odds, it prepared for the impossible. A fleet was assembled, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Hybrid warships, infused with stolen Zarkon technology, powered by the very energy humanity had once fought against. The greatest minds of the liberated worlds came together, forging an alliance with former enemies, united by the simple fact that survival required it. And at the head of it all stood Admiral Elias Voss, the man who had watched entire systems burn, who had sworn that humanity would not be erased. The mission was simple in concept, but nearly suicidal in execution. Find the hive core and destroy it. Because if they failed, there would be nothing left. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The fleet hung in the abyss of space, facing a darkness that seemed to consume the very light of the stars. The Void Rift was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. A chasm beyond time and space, a wound in the fabric of reality itself. The Zarkons had feared it, had sealed it away. But now, humanity had no choice but to go where no empire had ever dared. The warships advanced, their hulls reinforced with stolen Zarkon technology, shields pulsing with energy derived from the very weapons the harvesters had used against them. This was not just another battle. It was the last stand of an entire galaxy. If they failed, there would be no retreat, no second chance. As the fleet approached the rift, the enemy revealed itself. They emerged from the void in waves, monstrous, vessels shifting and writhing as if they were alive, their surfaces pulsing with an eerie crimson glow. These were not mere warships. They were predators. They didn't just fire weapons, they reached, twisted, and consumed. Every harvester ship was a living nightmare, a fusion of flesh and machine, warping and adapting to counter any attack. Admiral Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Valiant, his face etched with the grim determination of a man who had seen entire worlds fall. He had studied the harvesters, dissected their tactics, and now he was prepared to use their own methods against them. "Deploy the disruption field," he ordered. The fleet activated its most desperate weapon, an experimental pulse derived from the ancient Zarkon archives. It was designed to scramble the Hive Core's connection to its forces, causing momentary disruptions in its control. The risk was enormous. If the field failed, the harvesters would learn from it, adapt, and turn it against them. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then the first wave of harvesters collapsed. Ships that had once been relentless, unstoppable. Nightmares convulsed mid-flight, their structures failing, their coordination breaking. The Hive Core was strong, but even it had limits. For the first time in recorded history, the harvesters staggered. "Now!" Voss roared. "Push forward." The fleet surged ahead, firing everything they had. Torpedoes streaked through the darkness, beams of energy cutting through the harvester ranks. The once invincible armada was breaking. But the battle was far from won, because the Hive Core had noticed them. From the depths of the rift, something massive began to emerge. It was not a ship. It was not a structure. It was alive. The Hive Core was a construct beyond mortal comprehension, a seething, pulsating mass of energy and matter, vast enough to eclipse entire planets. It was not just a mind. It was a force of nature, an intelligence so ancient it had seen galaxies rise and fall, and now it focused on humanity. A psychic shockwave blasted through the fleet, sending human pilots reeling, their minds overwhelmed by an alien presence beyond anything they had ever experienced. It was not communication, it was domination. The Hive Core was trying to erase them, to absorb their very will. Ships veered off course, weapons systems faltered, and for a moment it seemed as if the battle was lost. But then, something unexpected happened. Humanity resisted. The psychic onslaught that had shattered empires before them failed to break the human mind. Because humans had endured enslavement. They had endured war. They had endured extinction. And through it all, they had adapted. The fleet's AI systems, designed to counteract electronic warfare, kicked in, isolating the psychic intrusion. Soldiers on the ground used neural blockers, cutting themselves off from the Hive Core's influence. The very thing that had made humanity unpredictable, their defiant, chaotic, unbreakable nature, was now their greatest weapon. Voss saw his chance. All ships, target the Hive Core's central mass. Fire everything. The Valiant led the charge, launching the first wave of experimental warheads, devices crafted from the very energy the harvesters had wielded. They struck the Hive Core's surface, burrowing deep before detonating in a chain reaction of impossible destruction. The entity screamed. The rift itself trembled, the surrounding space convulsing as if reality itself was rejecting what was happening. The Hive Core's form began to unravel, its vast consciousness struggling against the collapse. The harvesters, once relentless, now spasmed in confusion, their link to the core severed. The final blow came from humanity's greatest weapon. Not technology, not strategy, but sheer, relentless defiance. A last, desperate attack from the fleet broke through the core's final defenses, and in a blinding explosion of light, the ancient horror was gone. The rift began to collapse. "Get us out of here," Voss commanded. The fleet turned, escaping the imploding void as reality stitched itself back together. The last remnants of the harvesters disintegrated in the wake of their master's destruction. And just like that, the war was over. Silence filled the void. The once invincible enemy, the nightmare, that had lurked beyond time itself, was gone. The galaxy had survived. Humanity had done the impossible, not just by winning a war, but by proving that no force, no ancient horror, no empire, nothing could ever truly break them. As the fleet returned to the liberated worlds, messages flooded in from across the galaxy. The remnants of the Zarkons, the species once enslaved, the civilizations that had feared humanity's rise, they all sent one single message. We stand with you. Because in the end, humanity had not just fought for itself, It had fought for everyone, and in doing so, it had forged something greater than any empire, a future. The Dark Age was over, and the age of humanity had begun. The galaxy was free. The harvesters were gone. The rift had collapsed, sealing away the ancient nightmare that had threatened to consume everything. Humanity, against all odds, had not only survived but had emerged as the greatest power in the known universe. But victory has a cost. The aftermath of the war left scars across the stars. Entire planets had been lost. Entire species wiped from existence before the harvesters were stopped. The galactic map had been redrawn not by conquerors, but by survivors. The fragile alliances forged in desperation now faced a new challenge. What happens after survival? Admiral Elias Voss knew the war was not truly over. He had seen too many conflicts to believe that peace would last. Even before the harvesters, the galaxy had been a brutal place. The Zarkons had ruled with an iron fist, and when they fell, chaos had followed. Now, with humanity standing at the forefront, a question loomed over the galaxy. Would they become the next empire? It was a question that divided humanity itself. Some saw their newfound power as a responsibility, to guide the fractured civilizations, to rebuild, to ensure that nothing like the Zarkons or the Harvesters ever threatened existence again. Others saw it as an opportunity, a chance to carve out a dominion that no force could ever challenge. And then there were those who feared that something worse was still lurking in the shadows. The first signs came from the outer colonies. Deep, space stations on the edges of known space, where sensors still flickered with anomalies no one could explain. Ships vanished without a trace. Entire research outposts went silent overnight. Some believed it was the last remnants of the harvesters, still lingering like ghosts. Others whispered of something else. But Voss didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in threats. And when a distress signal came from the old Zarkon warfront, a place that should have been a lifeless graveyard, he knew that humanity's greatest challenge had yet to come. The signal was ancient, encoded in a way that predated even the Zarkon Empire. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a distress call. It was an invitation. The transmission came from deep within the Veil Nebula, a region of space so dense with cosmic storms that no ship had ever survived venturing too far inside. The Zarkons had marked it on their star maps with a single phrase, "Do not disturb the sleepers." But humanity had already disturbed things far older than themselves. And Voss, against every rational instinct, knew there was only one way forward. He had to go in. The Veil Nebula was a graveyard. As Admiral Elias Voss and his fleet pushed deeper into its storm-racked heart, the wreckage of ancient ships drifted through the darkness like ghosts. Some were unmistakably Zarkon, their massive imperial hulls corroded by centuries of silence. But others were different. Voss studied the holographic readouts on his command screen. These ships were older than the Zarkons, far older. Their designs were unfamiliar, their materials unidentifiable. Even after centuries of interstellar warfare, no records existed of these vessels. The implications were disturbing. The Zarkons had ruled for millennia, yet here was evidence of a power that predated even them, a power that had been buried. "Admiral," one of the officers called out, his voice tight with unease. "We've located the source of the signal. It's coming from a derelict structure, massive. We're sending visuals now." The screen flickered, revealing an object unlike anything they had expected. It was not a ship. It was a tomb. The structure floated at the heart of the nebula, half consumed by the storms that raged around it. It was a construct of impossible scale, larger than any known space station. Its surface marked with symbols that flickered with a strange, pulsing energy. The invitation had come from here. A deep instinct clawed at the back of Voss's mind, warning him to turn back. But humanity had never been known for walking away from the unknown. They had faced the Zarkons, the Harvesters, and the abyss of extinction itself. Whatever lay within that structure, they would face it too. "Prepare." "A landing team," Voss ordered. "We're going inside." The shuttle descended into the tomb's docking bay, its engines struggling against the crushing gravity distortions emanating from the structure. As the team stepped onto the ancient floor, their helmets lit up with red warnings. The air was breathable. Voss exchanged glances with his second-in-command, Lieutenant Arya Solis. This place shouldn't have an atmosphere. And yet, it does, she murmured, scanning the readings. Someone, or something, wants us here. They moved forward cautiously, their boots echoing in the cavernous hallways. The walls pulsed faintly, with light, as if the structure itself was alive, waiting. Strange murals covered every surface, depicting creatures that were neither Zarkon nor Harvester. And then they found it. A chamber stood at the end of the corridor, sealed by a doorway, covered in symbols. The signal pulsed stronger here, as if calling to them. Voss stepped forward and placed his hand against the structure. The door opened. Inside, suspended in the center of the chamber, was a figure. It was humanoid, but not human. Its form was clad in obsidian-like armor, its features obscured by an intricate mask. Strange energy surrounded it, keeping it frozen in time. Arya's breath caught. "This isn't a tomb, Admiral. It's a prison." Before Voss could respond, the structure shook. Something was awakening, and as the walls of the chamber lit up with the first words in an unknown language, their translators struggled before resolving the message into something they could understand. Single warning. You were never meant to wake them. The entire tomb trembled. Alarms blared through the team's comms as the ancient structure came alive. The walls pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic energy. A heartbeat. The symbols on the walls, once dormant, now shifted and rearranged, forming a new message. Containment breach detected. Admiral Voss barely had time to react before the figure at the center of the chamber moved. The energy field that had imprisoned it for eons flickered and shattered like glass. A low, unnatural hum filled the air as the figure descended to the ground, its armored form making no sound as it touched the surface. It stood still for a moment, as if adjusting to its newfound freedom. Then its eyes opened. Two glowing slits of deep violet light burned through the shadows of its mask. Arya Solis instinctively raised her weapon, but Voss lifted a hand, stopping her. Every instinct in his body told him that shooting was the worst possible idea. The being tilted its head slightly, its gaze scanning the human team before it spoke. Its voice was unlike anything they had ever heard, a layered, harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very air. And yet, the words were clear. Who dares to unseal the first? Voss felt the weight of the being's presence pressing against his mind. This was no ordinary entity. This was something ancient, something that had been locked away for a reason. "We are explorers," Voss said carefully. "We received a signal." The being's eyes flickered. A signal? Then, its gaze shifted past them, to the walls, to the ruined consoles lining the chamber, to the vast network of decayed machinery. The energy in the room pulsed faster, more erratic. No. The seal was never meant to break. The rift was not the end. The true war never ended. Voss's blood ran cold. What war? The being stepped forward. The room darkened as if space itself recoiled at its movement. The war that the Harvesters were only a shadow of. The words sent a shockwave through Voss's mind. The Harvesters had been the greatest terror the galaxy had ever known, an unstoppable force that had consumed entire civilizations. If they were only a shadow of something worse. Arya's voice broke through the tension. "Who are you?" The being turned to her, and for the first time there was something almost human in the way it regarded her. Curiosity. "I was once called Sithrakis, one of the firstborn, the last to fall when the old ones were betrayed." A silence fell over the team. The firstborn. The term was not in any known database, not in any recovered Zarkon records. This was something entirely new. Or rather, something older than anything humanity had ever known. Voss forced himself to stay composed. "Why were you imprisoned?" Sithrakis exhaled, a sound that reverberated through the chamber like a dying star. "Because we defied them." The tomb trembled again. This time, not from Sithrakis. Something else was coming. Sithrakis turned sharply, his body shifting into an instinctive battle stance. The air grew heavy with an unseen force, something ancient stirring beyond the walls of the structure. "They know I am awake," Sithrakis murmured. "We must leave. Now." Voss hesitated for only a moment before making the call. "All units, fall back to the shuttle." The team rushed toward the exit, but before they reached it, a new presence filled the chamber. From the shadows beyond the doorway, figures began to emerge. Not harvesters, not Zarkons, something worse. Their forms were shifting, impossible to define, half corporeal, half mechanical, their outlines glitching in and out of phase. Their eyes were pure darkness, voids in the fabric of reality. Entities that should not exist. Sithrakis took a step forward, his armor flaring with energy. "The Forgotten Ones," he whispered. "They have returned." Before Voss could ask what that meant, the first of the creatures lunged. Sithrakis moved with inhuman speed, his hand snapping outward, summoning a blade of pure energy from the void. He slashed through the nearest entity, and for a moment, reality itself screamed. The creature dissolved into writhing tendrils of darkness, but the others did not hesitate. They swarmed, the humans fired. Their bullets and plasma rounds met the creatures, but instead of piercing them, the projectiles vanished as if erased from existence. Sithrakis turned to Voss, urgency in his glowing eyes. "You do not possess the weapons to fight them. Get to your ship." Voss didn't argue. "Move!" The team sprinted down the corridors as the tomb collapsed around them, the Forgotten Ones flowing through the shadows like living nightmares. Sithrakis moved with them, warping through space in flashes of violet light, cutting through the horrors. With impossible precision, they reached the docking bay just as the shuttle's engines roared to life. Voss and his team dived inside as Sithrakis leaped onto the ramp, his blade still dripping with the remnants of the creatures. The doors slammed shut. "Get us out of here," Voss barked. The shuttle blasted off, soaring out of the tomb just as the entire structure collapsed into itself, swallowed by the storms of the Veil Nebula. For a moment, silence. Then, over the comms, the fleet's sensors exploded with warnings. Something was coming through the nebula. Not just a few ships, not even an armada, a force beyond comprehension. Sithrakis stepped forward, gazing at the unfolding chaos with something that almost resembled sorrow. They were watching, waiting. And now that I am free, the war resumes. Voss turned to face him, his jaw clenched. "Who are we fighting?" Sithrakis met his gaze. "The ones who made the Zarkons, the ones who created the harvesters, the true architects of the galaxy's suffering." He turned toward the viewport, where the nebula had begun to crack open like a wound. And beyond it, something moved, something vast. The Eternal Dominion has returned. Please subscribe this channel for getting more interesting videos.